ZHIYUN, a company you might be familiar with due to their range of 3-axis gimbals, have just released their first lighting units, the FIVERAY 100C and the FIVERAY M40. What sets these apart from other similar tube and pocket LED style lights is their brightness, with the 100C featuring a maximum output of 100 watts at 4000 Kelvin in boost mode, and the M40 outputting 40 watts at full power, which is quite punchy for such a small unit. On the 100C, either side of 4000 Kelvin, the brightness is gradually reduced, since boost mode takes advantage of both sets of LED diodes outputting equally at 4000 K. But even with boost mode off, this is still a pretty bright light for its size and price. So the size of these lights, combined with their output, means they should be pretty flexible. One great way tube lights can be used is to quickly and efficiently light a shot, sequence, or scene. Here, we were working with the fading evening light from outside, which is a pretty common occurrence when working on a budget. And if you've ever worked with lighting in a tiny team, or as a one-man band, under conditions where the natural light is changing, you might know how challenging it can be. It means we need to get our lighting set up and our shots captured relatively quickly. Scoping out your location beforehand can make this easier, and using flexible lighting units like tubes can make this even more efficient. Here, it was as easy as throwing up some bleached muslin material around a corner in the kitchen, simply held up by a cupboard door, and placing one of our FIVERAY 100C units in front of it with a small base stand attached. Due to the size and shape of the tube, it can easily slot in on the edge of the countertop and maintain a good spread of light across our muslin material, creating a soft fill in our kitchen, edge lighting our subject and separating him from the background, working with our window as motivation, and creating a specular reflection on the foreground wall, also feeding into the motivation from the window, whilst implying there might be more windows around the location. Our shadows were looking a bit dark in comparison to the rest of the scene, so we placed another FIVERAY tube on the stairs, shining out through the spindles and hitting the opposite wall. This provided a fill light to the shadows on our subject and foreground, and better matched up with the levels in the kitchen. We also have a small hatch in the kitchen leading into the next room, so we also placed a FIVERAY tube here. This made for a very subtle splash of light on the kitchen wall near our subject, helping to gently highlight him and aid with composition. All of our 100C units were set to 6200 Kelvin to more closely match the ambient outside of the window. For the close-up, we simply moved the tube bouncing from the muslin round the corner to just in front of our subject, bouncing from the white wall. This wrapped and softened up the light on the face further, and whilst a little different to the quality of light in our mid-shot, it provided a more fitting look to our close-up, and blends effectively together. This harder light for a wider shot and softer light for a closer shot is a technique used to varying degrees in film, and can often be due to spatial constraints or budget, like we see here. So you can see how we managed to take advantage of this evening light and quickly got our lighting set up together. And this was just one person setting up, lighting, acting, and shooting. So you get the idea of how quickly tube lights can be implemented for short sequences like this. Here, we lit 2 shots with our ZHIYUN lights, going from early evening to later evening. For the close-up, we started with evening light from the window, underexposed it, then added our lighting. Our key was simply 2 100C tubes, barn doors up, to support a sheet of diffusion. These were set to 100%, so we made sure to leave some airflow for the fans. For the little splashes of accent detail on the wall, representing ceiling lights and allowing us to separate our subject from the background with a light dark pattern across the frame, we boomed up 2 M40s, Again, using our ZHIYUN lights at a higher power allowed us to create a good contrast ratio between our key and evening ambient coming through the window, giving us enough power to achieve this control and get the balance we wanted between our lights and the already existing natural light. For the wider shot of our subject looking out of the window, watching the cars go by, we first added the table lamp to the scene. We then added an accent light to the wall and curtain on the top right of the frame with an M40. After this, we added a second accent with our second M40 on the opposite side of the frame, along with a 100C tube set to a cool blue colour, creating a very subtle edge light on our subject's left side, representing the disappearing evening light outside. Finally, we added a second 100C tube, set to the same colour temperature as the lamp, extending the light from the lamp and giving us more light to represent it on our subject. Since each of these shots were shot in different levels of ambient light, the power of our lights allowed us to work with both natural lighting situations, balancing our lighting ratios to match between each shot, and the portability of the lights meant we could take down and set up the lighting in different positions quickly, without worrying about heavy fixtures and modifiers. In this shot of our subject stood in the bathroom, we really utilised both the size and power output of these ZHIYUN lights. Let's turn our lights off and place our exposure back to a more accurate rendition of the original light conditions. This was actually shot in the middle of the day, and although a cloudy day, we had a fair amount of light coming through our back window. We wanted it to feel later in the day to create a moody evening interior shot, so we lowered the exposure using our ISO. Inside the bathroom behind the wall, we bounced an M40 unit from the ceiling to add some subtle fill into the bathroom. Next, we roughly bounced a 100C tube from the wall to create some directional fill to the foreground walls and door, representing the other window. Both the M40 inside the bathroom and the 100C outside the bathroom were set to 6200 Kelvin to more closely match the natural ambient light outdoors. Finally, we had a second 100C tube balanced and held in place on top of the mirrored cabinet in front and above of our subject. We had this set to about 3800 Kelvin at maximum power in boost mode, allowing us to get a good amount of light output onto our subject whilst underexposing the ambient light from the window. This light represents a ceiling light in the bathroom, and we utilised the barn doors and angled the tube so that there wasn't too much spill, apart from this patch on the wall, which helped to sell the ceiling light look. If we take our exposure up to a closer representation of how the scene looked in real life, you can see how the power of these lights, combined with the size, and therefore flexibility, helped us to both set up quickly and place lights in areas we might not have been able to otherwise, and balance the ambient light to the level we wanted it. This is the kind of situation smaller lights like this can be very beneficial, and with higher output relative to the size and quality of light produced, they can certainly benefit both lower and higher budget productions.